My name is Bill Rogg. When my grandmother in Virginia died, they were settling the estate, and there was a dresser in the front hall of my grandmother's home, and it had never really, I guess people had looked in it, but really no one had been really allowed to go into it my whole life. And what it was an archive of things that Dr. Emily Dunning Behringer had saved. It covered from the 1850s all the way through to her death in 1961. And when you started going through this, it really jumped out at you. This stuff was pretty cool in that the family, and I kind of knew about this, Emily Dunning Behringer's, and when she was a child, Emily Dunning, her family was quite wealthy. And as it turned out, her father was like this incredibly charismatic, interesting man who had some failings from a moral standpoint, and ended up serving the state for a period of time.
Why so?
What's that?
Why so?
He had taken some people's money and promised to pay it back, and he, by mistake, didn't. And he did this one time and had left and traveled in Europe extensively during the time of the statute of limitations, and then returned and was doing it again. And this time, they didn't find it as amusing, and so he had to spend some time abroad under a different name. But this archive was just fascinating. It got me looking into these people, and what came out of this was I'd kind of gotten interested because of the sordid and these tales of treachery and so forth. But what I found was that there were an awful lot of artists in the family, and they did beautiful work. And the thing I'm most excited about, I brought a book that was written by William Bailey Lang, which would have been Dr. Emily Dunning's grandfather. And he imported iron from England, was his business, and he did very well at it. And he started getting into land development and building houses. And he was this amateur architect, and he built these 3 houses in Roxbury, Massachusetts, which is now part of Boston. At the time, it was a little village. And they were in the Elizabethan style. And they're still written about in architecture books today. They're just these beautiful, they call them cottages, but they're houses. And this book that he wrote, I ended up finding a copy of it in England, and so that I brought it to the art show for everyone to see. And the thing that I find very interesting about this kind of study of genealogy and these things from the past was that this William Bailey Lang, he lived in the 1840s. He built these houses. One of the houses had a really cool tower next to it. And next year we're going to have a family reunion in Cotuit. William Bailey Lang's grandson, his name is William Bailey Dunning. He was a dentist in New York. He and his wife built a house in Cotuit, Massachusetts. It was a summer home. And behind the house is a tower identical to the one William Bailey Lang had built 60, 70 years earlier. And so clearly the grandson was influenced by the work that his grandfather had done. And you'll see William Bailey Dunning's tower in a watercolor painting that's also here at the art show. So it's kind of fun to see how older people have influenced younger people over a period of time, and especially in the art that they prepare.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can you start off just introducing yourself?
I certainly can. I'm Julia Lester. I'm Julia Beebe Lester, which is how I got into this group because my mother married Tom Beebe. My Dunning mother married Tom Beebe. And I currently live in Hawaii, but I still have very strong emotional ties to the East Coast.
So can you just start by talking a little bit about the artwork that you have here?
Yes. When I first heard about this project, I asked Bill if he would like to see this rather large watercolor that my grandfather did of our Cotuit house called Westward. And Bill said, of course, he would love to see it, so it's here. It's my favorite of his watercolors. It's, I think, one of his largest, actually. But the reason I love it so much is that the perspective shows the kind of northwest corner room where I grew up. And so in Hawaii especially, it's a very nice memory of where I was. And he was just a very creative person himself, and the picture is beautiful, and it shows a flower garden that was gone by the time I was a child, but still it was there before. And also in the background of this picture, you can just barely see the tower, which is a landmark, well-known all over the town. It started out as a water tower, because when it was first built, it was needed for the water tank so that there'd be a gravity flow down to the house for water. But then once they put a water pump underground, then he turned it into a series of studios. In the first floor, there was a coal bin, because we were still using a coal stove at the time. And then on the second floor was his carpentry studio. And on the third floor was a wonderful place where he either painted, there was a sink and everything, or he practiced his cello. And then on the fourth floor was kind of a study where he wrote and read and just relaxed. And then there was a nice view from there. So that's the picture.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Sandy Stever, Sanford Barringer Stever, the son of Edgar Zell Stever and Valona Barringer Stever. And I brought artwork by family members, including my mother, father, two brothers, and some of my own work, and some of my grandparents. I brought two paintings by my grandfather, Benjamin Stockwell Barringer, and these were paintings he'd done in New Canaan, Connecticut, and one is of and they're related to the landscapes around New Canaan at that time. One is a winter scene of the house they lived in, Little Mews, and another is a scene of a rangy apple tree across the street in front of a barn. That painting is called Arteriosclerosis, because grandfather said that's what it looks like when you open somebody up. So he painted and he did architecture, and seems to have inherited the house building gene and transmitted it on to my brother through my mother. He was also a big fan of color, and mother took that further when she went to art school and learned more about formal use of colors, and she was fearless in her use. My brother Zell had bought a painting she'd done in college of a harvest scene, and the vibrancy of the colors is evident there, as is in her craft work, including knitting and painting. My father, who's included in this art show as a courtesy of courted spouses, was a sculptor and a painter. He worked in a variety of mediums, even including fabric very early on. His specialty was portraiture. He liked doing portraits particularly of children and animals. So we have sculptures and medals of schnauzers, of llamas, goats, skunks, deer, and a leopard, a leopard, life-size leopard, which stands at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. I brought work of his, mainly medals and coins, spanning about 7 decades of work. He was a professional artist and had a chance to exercise his work for a long time. And for the last 40 years of his career, he worked at the U.S. Mint, and where he did coins, medals, and a variety of other projects that the Mint brought out. And one of the nice things about the U.S. Mint is that the government lets its artists sign their work, so coins will carry his initials. You have to look hard for them sometimes, but they're there. My brother Beaumont had studied fashion design at Syracuse University, and later, when he was in New York, transmuted that into interior design. But you can see the interest in color and the use of vibrant color and pattern coming down from grandfather through his mother to him. And the two paintings by Ted, my older brother, also show this interest in color and sort of almost folkloric simplicity. Some other members of the family, of course, on Bam's side, or Emily Dunning Barron's side, is that she wrote her autobiography, which later became a movie. And reading over that, it's clear she had writing talent, although this was largely directed towards her professional work in professional papers, conference proceedings and the like. And Pa had done that too. There are offprints of his path-breaking work in what we now call radiation oncology. This shows that the artistic impulse has found its way into different venues, different methods, different media. And for my parents, both of them being artists, they met in art school. Art was an essential dimension of human existence, and growing up as children, that was something we had in common. There was always art around, things to be done, but art was always present, could always be seen as part of daily life, and so it was a family. Art was very much a family affair. It was collaborative, and one of the ways in which we live our lives.
Could you start by introducing yourself?
I will. Yes, I'm Sarah Beebe Davis. I'm the second daughter of Frances Dunning Beebe and her husband Tom Beebe. Creativity has always been something that's important to me, and I particularly love to play with colors of fabric. And so in the exhibit I have one of my quilts, which is my sailing quilt. If you stand on the beach and look out in the harbor, you'll see a whole lot of different sizes and shapes of sailboats. What I created was my own fleet of fanciful sailboats, and that's a quilt for the master bedroom at the Katuitt House, which we call Westwood. Westwood was built, as my sister has told you, by our grandfather and grandmother, and as a summer house, and sailing has always been part of our family. I also brought watercolors done by Dr. William Bailey Dunning, which go with Julia's picture of the house Westwood. These are pictures that he painted. He painted lots of watercolor pictures, and these happen to be trees around the area. I also brought things that his mother-in-law, Lucy Gibbons Morse, made. They're called silhouettes, and she used to mount them in silk and put them in front of lamps, or she made screens, or she made anything where the light might flicker behind them and it would look like the fairies or the silhouettes were dancing. So the silhouettes are here, as well as some rather fascinating crepe paper dolls that she made as fundraising items for the Katuitt Library, which she founded. And she was always a very creative person and interested in making something that she could sell at a library fair for the benefit of the library.
I'm John Stever, and this is Scott Stever, my brother. And the artwork that we brought is some that I have in my apartment in New York. It is the pipe fitter that my grandfather, Edgar Zell Stever, did. What I was told was that down the road from the art school was a pipe manufacturing facility or something like this. There were definitely blue-collar workmen who were there, and they were asked by the art school to come and pose for the artists, and so that's where the model came from. So he was a pipe fitter doing something, and so it's definitely him.
And they would do it at night because they would make extra money
Right.
after they worked their shift at
Right.
the pipe works.
And so in a sense, it is also one of several in a series because our mother, Karen Stever, has some others from the same time period, and so probably the same set of workmen who posed for these pictures in that.
They're immortalized
They're
in
immortalized.
nudes. The next piece is
So the next piece was
Or pieces.
pieces. We brought 3 watercolors that my uncle Beaumont did.
yes.
And those were a series of watercolors from when he was in college studying fashion design
At Syracuse
at Syracuse
University.
University. And they're just a really beautiful set of watercolors that he did as fashion plates. And apparently he switched from fashion to what he did later in life, which was interior design. Because I was recently told because he hated to be a tailor.
He was a
hated,
terrible seamstress. So he was very good at the grand vision of what fashion should be, but the execution part, if he was on, America's Next Greatest Fashion Designer, he probably would have failed out because he couldn't get his stitching quite right.
Quite right.
It was, I guess, let's see, he started at the U.S. Mint in 1965, I think. And so he was a sculptor for the U.S. Mint for much of his career, although he had actually done a fair number of pieces, coins prior to that. And I think the work that he did, I guess he did 15 years of sculpting coins before he joined the Mint. So he spent his entire, adult career, I think, at the Mint. He also designed and sculpted the mascot for Lafayette College, which it still is today. So if you go to Lafayette College, it's a panther, and that was done by Granddad.
He did a lot of coins, and of course his most famous.
Well, he did the Virginia.
He did the Virginia quarter.
Yeah.
So that's the one that's got the most notoriety.
Yeah.
So, and I think he always appreciated the fact that everybody had his artwork in their pocket.
Yeah.
Because it was the coins.
Yeah.
And if you look very closely at the jeweler's hoop, and I finally saw it for the first time today, you can see his initials EZS in
The water
on
on the lower right-hand corner.
of the Virginia coin.
I'm Zell Stever, and this is my wife, Liz Raisbeck. And we brought several pieces of family art up. We bought a picture of my mother had painted probably late in her training at Yale University. And it's a picture of an apple orchard. And it hung in our dining room when I was a child. And eventually it came to me, and just recently I had it restored. And so it's a lovely piece. And it was typical of my mother, Valona Stever, typical of her work in that she had these lovely bright colors. And you see these bright oranges and bright reds, and it's a great picture of an apple orchard. The second thing I brought up was a carving my father did of a llama, and it's carved in walnut, and from that walnut carving, Dad, and I can't tell for sure, but it looks like he made a plaster mold from that wooden model and made several llamas in plaster, and then was commissioned somewhere in the mid to late 50s to make a llama of exactly the same except twice as big. And that llama was in a department store in New York City. It was designed to sell cashmere, women's cashmere products. And we don't know ever what happened to it, but it was a large, probably 2.5 feet tall. And then we brought a picture of a mosaic tile that my family did for me as a gift when I had purchased the house in Noank in 1964. And it was a family effort, and you can see clearly my father had something to do with the design, and my brothers and my mother worked on this together, and it was given to me right before the bathroom was put in, so it's mounted of seascape. And at the time, I had worked, right before I bought the house, at my senior year in college, I had worked at the Marine Labs, and my parents were trying to capture the idea that this was a maritime scene, and it's a kind of a neat mosaic family. And then I have on display there with a series of photographs. One is a house that I designed and built that's located up on the St. Lawrence River on Grindstone Island. My father had taken the family to go see the famous Philip Johnson house in New Canaan, and Dad's remark was at the time, flat roofs leak. And that house has become, it's really an iconic house for Philip Johnson. It's all glass. And a number of years later, I had worked on my Uncle Ben's farm, where there were old tobacco sheds with post and beam construction. And somewhere along the line, probably about 20 years ago, I thought this would really be neat to sort of combine a glass house with a post and beam building. And so what you see is in that photograph is starting on one side and going around, you'll see the original plan, and then you'll see a model of what that plan would look like. So it gave me some idea what the space would look like. And then you see the actual construction of the post and beam building was put up without any mechanical equipment. It was done the old-fashioned way with a gin pole. And then you get around to the end of it where you see a modern concrete countertop, which we made, and then sort of the final house. And Liz and I live in that in the summer. And it's really a great house because you can see a bird fly by, and you see it coming at you, and you see it going away from you. And then the other picture that I brought was a series of projects that I've done over the years. There's a cradle that I designed and built. There's a blanket chest that I designed and built for one of our sons. And then there's a picture of 3 boats. A Bidarka, which is the skin boat, was designed using, it's a boat that hangs up in our living room when not in use at the river. It is a usable boat, by the way. And then you'll see St. Lawrence skiff that my Uncle Andy designed the hull, and then I designed the interior and the decks for that boat, and that built a West Greenland kayak. And so I did a stitch and glue, very lightweight kayak, and that kayak we still have, still use. So that's sort of what the kinds of things that we've been involved with, and this was all sort of as a way of keeping one's sanity while one's a government employee doing policy and regulatory work.
I'm Wynne Rogg, and I wrote a book.
What's the name of your book?
The name of the book is Boreas the Bear. It was a group of stories that I wrote for my granddaughter, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years ago after she was born. She was named India Wynne Eisenstadt, and I thought she should have some stories from this Wynne. And so I wrote them down in Virginia. It started with a picture that Jenny had sent me of her daughter sitting in the back of a bear, the bear being out in the hall right now. And she was only 9 months old, and she was so cute. And I said, look at that picture. I said, there's got to be a story there. And so late at night, my husband was not well at that time, and I was up a lot of nights. Late at night, I used my new computer skills, which my son had helped me with, and wrote chapter by chapter. And it started taking a life of its own, and I sent chapters to various different children. And unfortunately, Oscar died that year, and I didn't think anything more about them. I'd written it, and I was doing other things. And I came north for Christmas, and we had presents under the Christmas tree, and at the bottom was a brown paper present, and in it was 3 copies of my book. And I had no idea, it was a total surprise. Henry put it together, and we did a couple of, we got an artist after a bit, and revamped it a couple of times, and anyway, We even got a Library of Congress number for it.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I haven't really sold many copies because I didn't write it really to sell it, I just wrote it to write it. So, but you can go on Amazon and it's sold in 32 countries. I think that astounded me the most of all.
Have you had a chance to read them to India?
I've read part of a chapter and she wasn't interested. And then later on she started to read it herself and she said, "Why did you write this, grandmother?" And I said, "Well, because I wanted to tell you a story." And she never did tell me whether she liked it or not, but it doesn't make any difference. I was very pleased to do this. And I wrote, over the years I've written some poetry too, and I decided as long as this process was not that complicated, I would compile the poetry that I've written, and I wrote, we put it together in a book called Wild Strawberries. And so that's my writing adventures.
Excellent.
Well, Beebe, I'm a Dunning, William Dunning. Beebe, my mother was Frances Dunning. Beebe, she was the daughter of William Bailey Dunning. My father was into genealogy like crazy, and he was mostly on the Beebe side, but he did a little bit on my mother's side. But what he would do is he would work in New York, and in lunch hour he'd go to the library. And back in those days, the high tech research was the Xerox machine. And he'd go into the research section, he'd copy out a page here or there, and kind of collate it into folders that are quite confusing, but he understood them. But he would also go back like in England, where we all came from on the Beebe side, he would go and hire people to go into churches and copy out records. But I inherited his box. And you go through all that, and it was so confusing. I was trying to say, now how can you figure this out for the common person like me to understand? And believe it or not, today the weapons of choice are software programs. And this particular program, all I had to do was fill in names, and it printed it all out in about a second.
Well, my name is Jennifer Eisenstadt. I'm an interior designer. And I believe today I'm talking about the piece that ran in the Wall Street Journal of my bathroom, which was a real honor. The Wall Street Journal came and asked me if they could run it as an example of a really beautiful space, which they would break down and tell people how to recreate it in their own homes. So,
Anything unique about the bathroom?
you know, I don't know if there's anything unique about a bathroom. It's quite functional, but I do think it is really beautiful, and I have lots of moments of quiet contemplation in the space. The last apartment I just finished was a really large apartment on the Upper West Side at the El Dorado, which is this beautiful deco building, for the guitarist from Fish, who is incidentally going to be playing in the Grateful Dead reunion concert.
Hello.
Oh, say hi to your mom. She's on TV.
Would you like to be on TV?
Go on TV.
On TV.
Yeah,
TV.
But here's my greatest work, India and Teddy. But we're missing their brother Eli.
How are we on TV?
Oh, just wait.
It's the guitar that I had built from scratch. Showed up at a workshop in Pennsylvania with a scrap of wood and a table, and we built a Martin guitar. On Saturday, you start off with a bench and a block of wood, and then by Sunday, the next week, you end up with essentially a Martin guitar. What is unique about this in terms of the family is on the headstock, I built there's a piece of inlay in there, and it represents my 5 children and the fact that I spent some time in Australia. There are 5 stars for each one of my children, carved out of Australian abalone, and sitting in the base of a piece of walnut that I got off a tree from the Rogg family farm in Virginia. So I took that, put the inlay, and put it in the headstock. So it makes it a unique heirloom for the Rogg and Selesky family.
Emily Selesky. I have a floral arrangement, a planter, that I made in my plant science class at school. What's in there is some red geraniums, bacopa, and a dracaena spike, which just is the big puffy thing in the middle that makes it look all pretty. We have our annual spring sale at my school, Lyman Hall, in Wallingford, every year, and our teacher, Miss Amenta, was going to be selling planters, so she taught the class how to, all 8 of us. And I believe I made a total of 11 planters in total, and the one downstairs is one of them. We have one back at the house as well. So we sold those at our sale. I sold all of mine, which was pretty darn awesome. One to the principal, I might add. I mean, these things sold from around $10 to $40, I believe, so sure, money. But I also do like these whole floral design things, so it could be a future career for me, but I haven't totally figured that out yet.
I recently just shared Junior League of Hartford's Decorator Show House, our 13th show house. 4,000 people attended over a period of 3 weeks. We raised $136,000, all of which goes back to charitable work that Junior League of Hartford does in the community. We had 36 designers. We had 36 designers' faces, and they decorated the room. They take a blank slate and make a room, turn it from an ugly duckling into a wonderful swan. My favorite room was the master bedroom. It was done in lovely shades of grays and blues. It went from Pepto-Bismol pink to a lovely transformation. And our other favorite room was the bathroom, which had Asian theme, which was lovely. I worked on the project we started looking at a house in August. We got the house in January, and we started work February 1st. It was completed, open to the public as of April 25th. No, this has been a wonderful family adventure, and I hope that we continue this.
This art show is so much fun, and to discover how many talents were in this family. Are people writing books, artists, people doing crafts. So I think it was trying to find people's creativity and being delighted that there was so much of it in this family. So I hope we do this kind of thing every couple of years.